Imagine you were sending a voice note to a native English speaker. You're brimming with confidence, right?
Oh, yeah. Always a dangerous place to be.
Exactly. So you're attempting to share this deeply personal, nostalgic childhood memory, only to realize the grammar you just used didn't emphasize your past at all.
Right.
Instead, it accidentally proved you were talking about a complete hallucination, like
Yeah.
a total fantasy.
Yeah, you thought you were sharing a memory of who you were, but structurally you just described an imaginary universe.
Which is wild.
It happens far more often than people realize, too. I mean, we tend to think of grammar as this cold, rigid, mathematical formula. Subject plus verb equals sentence.
Right, the math of language.
Exactly. But the moment you start dealing with nostalgia or memory, the math just falls apart. The rules of how we express our past are entirely driven by emotional nuance.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a brilliantly detailed linguistic guide focused on this uniquely human trap, which is how we talk about who we used to be.
It's such a fascinating area of language.
It really is. And our mission today is to help you, the listener, master the subtle but incredibly powerful difference between two highly specific terms, which are used to and would.
Yeah, getting this right changes everything.
We want to shortcut the confusion for you so you can share your own history with, like, absolute cinematic precision without falling into the traps that routinely catch even advanced English learners.
Because these two terms are fascinating. At first glance, they look and feel almost identical,
Yeah, they do.
They sit in the exact same part of a sentence. They both deal with looking backwards. But if you look under the hood at how they actually function, they are not a team.
Not at all.
Right. They are intense rivals with completely different personalities.
And the source material we're looking at today opens with this incredibly relatable anecdote that perfectly captures that rivalry.
Oh, the voice message story.
Yes. So there's this story of a confident English learner who sends a voice message, incredibly proud of their progress, and they say, "When I was a kid, I used to would play outside every day."
I mean, you can completely understand the logic there.
Oh, the logic is flawless if you treat language like an equation. The brain naturally assumes, well, I want to emphasize the past.
Right.
Used to is a past tense concept. Would is a past tense concept. Therefore, combining them creates a superpass,
A superpast, exactly.
where more grammar words must equal more accuracy, right?
Yeah. The intention is great, but the execution reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the structural job these words do. You absolutely cannot combine used to and would in the same clause.
It's a total crash.
It is. Trying to use both of them at the same time is it's like trying to play a VHS tape and a DVD of the exact same movie on the same television simultaneously.
I love that analogy.
The intent is the same, but the signals cross, the hardware crashes, and all you get is static on the screen. Because both words perform the identical foundational job of indicating a timeline that is definitively over.
Right, so you cannot combine them. You're basically wearing two coats and then complaining you're too hot.
Perfect way to put it.
And what makes this deceptively tricky, I think, is the raw mechanics of it.
Oh, for sure.
If you look at the shape of these phrases, both words force you to use the absolute base form of the next verb. There's no ing at the end, no in. It's just used to play or would go.
Huh.
The architectural shape is so incredibly bare bones.
Right, which naturally invites people to try and stack them like Lego bricks to make them feel more substantial.
Exactly.
But the simplicity is the trap here. Because the structure is so basic, we have to look past the mechanics and examine the specific emotional flavor of the past you're trying to convey.
So we have to pick one coat.
Yes. To pick the right machine, you have to know what kind of movie you want to show the listener. So let's look at the first option.
Okay, used to. The sources describe used to as a remarkably generous word, like it's the ultimate before and after marker.
It really is. It does an immense amount of heavy lifting for the speaker. Well, when you deliver a sentence like, I used to hate vegetables, or she used to be painfully shy, you are ostensibly making a straightforward factual statement about history.
Right.
But structurally, there is a quiet, invisible clause sitting right at the end of that sentence, which is, but not anymore.
Oh, so it's an automatic 2-for-1 deal.
Exactly.
You don't have to explain the contrast to the person listening. Like, if I say he used to have long hair, that automatically guarantees that he has short hair now.
You don't even have to say it.
But let me throw a wrench into this.
Go for it.
If the word implicitly guarantees a fundamental change in reality, what happens if I say, I used to love coffee, but I actually still drink it every single morning and love it just as much today.
Ah, well, you've just stumbled into one of the primary errors highlighted in the source's mistake lab section.
Oh, no.
Yeah, if you apply used to a condition that is still true in the present moment, you are accidentally retiring your own reality.
Retiring your own reality. That is a great way to put it.
It's true. The term strictly enforces a hard boundary that the condition is over. So if you tell a friend, I used to love coffee, they will immediately assume you had to give it up for health reasons or...
Or you just lost your taste for it.
Exactly. So when you subsequently order a latte, you've created a massive communication breakdown.
Right, because I just communicated a profound change that never actually occurred.
Precisely. If the condition is still true, you bypass the past entirely and just say, I love coffee.
Okay, so used to gives us the cold, hard facts. It establishes a before and after.
Mm-hmm.
But as a listener, a cold fact doesn't really put me in the room with you. It feels a bit like reading a Wikipedia page of my own life, you know?
Yeah, it's very clinical.
Right. If I don't just want to state a factual change, if I actually want you to smell the air and see the colors of my childhood used to, feels a little too stiff. So how does English solve that?
Well, that requires a pivot to our second term, which is would.
Ah, would. The sources referred to would as a cinematic tool, which I feel like completely changes the texture of the conversation.
Completely changes it.
It plays like a grainy, warm home video in your head. Like sentences such as, every summer we would drive to the lake, or my dad would make pancakes every Sunday.
Yeah, those don't feel like Wikipedia facts at all.
They feel so intimate.
Notice the difference in the underlying mechanism there, too. Used to gives you a data point. Would gives you a scene.
It shows rather than tells.
Exactly.
When someone says we would drive to the lake, you don't just process the information of the road trip, you mentally populate the car.
Right, you're in the back seat.
Yes. You imagine the dusty dashboard, the windows rolled down, someone complaining about the radio station. It acts as this trigger for sensory details.
It really does.
Yeah.
But there is a massive caveat to that cinematic power.
Okay, what is it?
Would is utterly dependent on a time signal. It cannot survive in a vacuum.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if you just approach someone at a bus stop and abruptly say, I would walk to school, the listener will be completely lost.
Because would is secretly a conditional word.
Yes.
They'd be waiting for the second half of the thought, like you would walk to school if what? If your car broke down, if you had the energy.
You've hit on the exact reason it causes so much confusion. By nature, would begs for an if. It leans entirely into the hypothetical.
Right.
The only way to override that hypothetical nature and lock it firmly into the past tense is by anchoring it with context first. You have to set the stage.
So like saying, when I was young?
Or back when we lived in Chicago?
Exactly. The anchor comes first, the would comes second.
That makes so much sense.
And once you provide that temporal anchor, would transforms. It no longer means maybe. It means the event happened repeatedly.
Yeah.
It was a real, regular ritual.
Okay, we have the distinct flavors down. Used to is the factual declaration of a changed reality. Would is the warm, nostalgic, ritualistic playback.
You got it. But there is a hard, unforgiving grammatical rule, what the text explicitly labels a grammar jail offense, that separates these two entirely. You can't just pick based on vibes.
No, you definitely cannot. The absolute dividing line is drawn between the concepts of habits and states.
Okay, let's ground those terms, because abstract grammar jargon usually loses people. Let's play a rapid-fire game to test this out.
I love a game. Let's do it.
I'll throw out a scenario from life, and you classify it. Ready? Calling your mom every Sunday.
That is a habit. It's a discrete, repeated action. You actively pick up the phone, make the call, and hang up.
Okay. Owning a golden retriever.
State. That's a continuous condition. You aren't actively owning the dog at 8 a.m., stopping, and then owning it again at noon. It's simply a true fact about your life.
Nice. Biting your fingernails during a math test.
Habit. Physical, repeated action.
Being afraid of the dark.
State. A psychological condition that just exists in the background.
Okay, I see the distinction really clearly now. Actions you do versus conditions you simply exist in.
Exactly.
So how does our grammar jail rule apply to this?
The rule is ironclad. Both used to and would function perfectly well for habits.
Okay.
You are entirely free to say, I used to call my mom every Sunday, or I would call my mom every Sunday. Both are grammatically flawless.
Got it.
But for states, would is strictly forbidden. You have no choice. You must use used to.
Okay, let me push back on this just to see why the rule is so strict. Let's take a past state, like living in Paris.
Great example.
If I say, I used to live in Paris, I've established a past state, I was a resident, now I am not. What exactly happens to the structural integrity of my story if I slip up and say, I would live in Paris?
The structural integrity collapses entirely.
Really?
Yeah, because you've unintentionally invoked that conditional nature we talked about earlier. When you say, I would live in Paris, the listener's brain violently shifts gears.
Whoa.
It stops processing a memory and instantly assumes you are pitching a hypothetical fantasy for the future.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it sounds like I'm saying, I would live in Paris if I won the lottery, or if I could find a job there.
Exactly. Your attempt at nostalgia just became a daydream.
That is a massive shift.
Or consider a more emotional example. He used to be my best friend. That communicates a grounded, albeit sad, memory of a past state.
Right.
But if you break the rule and say, he would be my best friend, the listener assumes you're talking about a stranger across the room. You sound like you are imagining a friend who doesn't even exist yet.
So you aren't just making a slight syntactical error. You are ripping the listener out of the timeline of the real past and dropping them into an imaginary future.
It's totally disorienting.
I completely understand why the source calls it grammar jail. You literally break reality.
It's a structural necessity to keep our timelines organized.
Okay, so we focused heavily on warm memories and the established facts of our history. But let's be honest, the past wasn't always cozy Sunday mornings and trips to Paris.
Unfortunate but true.
Often, the past is defined by what didn't happen. So we need to navigate the negative forms of these words, and there's a very sneaky mechanical trap waiting for us here.
Yes, the mechanics of the negative past trip up native speakers just as often as learners, to be honest.
Let's handle would first, as it's highly straightforward.
Yeah, to make it negative, you simply contract it to wouldn't. She wouldn't go to bed before midnight.
Right.
The cinematic rule still applies. You're just showing a movie of a refusal or a lack of action.
The movie just happens to be about someone being really stubborn.
Pretty much. But the real trap lies with used to. The negative form is didn't used to. Notice the spelling change there. The letter D at the end of used completely vanishes.
Now, a lot of textbooks will explain this by saying that the word didn't is already acting as the past tense marker.
Right, the classic explanation.
It's loudly announcing to the sentence, hey everybody, we're in the past. So the word use doesn't need a past tense badge too, and drops the D. But looking at the linguistic mechanics behind this, it's actually driven by human laziness, or rather phonetic efficiency.
Phonetic efficiency is a massive driver of grammar rules over time.
Definitely. If you try to say didn't used to out loud, pay attention to what your mouth has to do. You have to articulate the sharp T at the end of didn't, immediately transition into a soft D at the end of used, and then instantly hit another hard T for the word to.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Try saying TDDT quickly. The human mouth absolutely hates that sequence.
It's incredibly clunky, and the brain naturally searches for the path of least resistance when speaking.
Exactly.
Over decades of spoken English, people simply stopped pronouncing that middle D because it interrupted the flow of the sentence. And eventually, the written grammar rules caught up to the spoken reality. The deed was formally dropped in the negative form.
I love when formal grammar rules are just the result of people deciding something that's too annoying to say out loud.
It happens more than you'd think.
And while we are lingering in the mistake lab looking at dropped letters, we have to mention another major error highlighted in the sources that happens in positive sentences.
Oh, forgetting the word to entirely.
Yes, writing or saying something like, I used to play guitar.
It happens constantly in informal writing, again, because of how quickly we speak. When native speakers say used to, they blend it into a single sound like useta.
Right, you said that.
Because the distinct to gets swallowed in speech, people often forget to include it when they write. But the listener must remember that the to is not optional decoration.
It's a critical piece.
It is a critical piece of structural engineering connecting your past state to the action itself.
You cannot fire the to. It is a load-bearing word.
Exactly.
All right, we have covered an immense amount of ground here. We've contrasted the cold, generous facts of used to with the cinematic, ritualistic magic of would. We've established the absolute barrier between habits and states, and we've navigated the phonetic traps in the negative forms.
We've been through it all.
But knowing a rule in a controlled environment is entirely different from pulling it out of your brain mid-conversation at a live dinner party. So how do we actually apply this in real life?
Well, the source material addresses this exact challenge by providing a highly practical synthesis a 3-question mental framework.
Oh, I love a mental framework.
It's great. You can run through this checklist in a fraction of a second before opening your mouth.
A good mental framework is a lifesaver. Walk us through it.
Okay, question 1. Is the memory I'm about to share a habit or a state? Meaning, was it an active, repeated motion, or was it just a continuous condition of my life?
Right.
If it was a state like living somewhere, feeling something, or being someone, you stop right there. The flowchart ends. You must use used to.
Simple. State equals used to. Done. What's next?
Question 2. If the memory is an active habit, what kind of experience do I want the listener to have? Do I just want to inform them of a changed fact?
In which case, I grab used to.
Exactly. But do I want to pull them into my memory and paint a picture of the ritual? If so, reach for would.
So it's factual data dump versus cinematic playback.
Perfect way to remember it. And question 3, the failsafe. Is this thing still true today?
The reality check.
Yes. If the answer is yes, abandon both terms immediately. Do not use either of them, or you will accidentally announce to the world that the habit or state is dead. Just use the present tense.
Let's put this framework into action with a real-life conversational example from the text.
Yeah.
Because I think this shows how manipulating these specific words gives sentences profound emotional weight.
Especially when discussing childhood or relationships.
Exactly. So imagine we're at that dinner party and someone asks you how you spent your time as a kid.
Well, a perfectly acceptable, grammatically correct answer would be, I played video games.
It's fine. It's accurate. But it's super flat.
Very flat.
Contrast that with applying our framework. I used to be obsessed with video games. My brother and I would stay up way too late.
The difference in richness is staggering, honestly.
It's an entirely different tier of communication. You deploy used to be obsessed to establish the past state. You're acknowledging the psychological condition and implicitly promising the listener that the obsession is over.
Right. The before and after is set.
Then you seamlessly shift gears to we would stay up way too late, and instantly the projector clicks on. I'm no longer just hearing facts. I'm picturing you and your brother in a dark living room, illuminated by a glowing television screen, trying to keep the volume down so your parents don't wake up.
And recognizing that shift is the ultimate goal here. This isn't about passing a linguistics exam.
No.
It's about recognizing that the words you choose dictate the intimacy of the story you are telling. Grammar is just the invisible scaffolding supporting your humanity.
The scaffolding supporting your humanity. That is incredibly poignant.
And to truly absorb this, you have to take it out of the textbook and into the world. Start actively hunting for these markers in the wild.
Yeah, listen to your friends tell stories.
Exactly. Pay attention to dialogue in films or lyrics in nostalgic songs. Notice the exact moment a storyteller reaches for, used to lay down the foundation, and watch how they pivot to would when they want to pull you into the scene.
Once you hear the rhythm, it becomes second nature.
It really does.
So if you're listening, as you walk away from this deep dive today, keep the core takeaway in mind. Treat used to as your heavy-duty factual workhorse. It establishes the realities and conditions that defined you, but are now definitively in the rearview mirror. And treat would as your vintage film projector reserved strictly for those specific, repeated actions that play back like glowing memories in a dark room.
And hey, if you mix them up while practicing, don't panic. Stumbling through a messy sentence out loud is infinitely more valuable than staying silent out of fear of grammar jail.
Your brain will try to convince you that you're failing, but the mess is where the learning happens. Before we close out, I want to circle back to the philosophical side of this. We noted at the beginning that this specific corner of language feels less like math and more like watercolor painting.
Yeah.
It's messy, it's deeply emotional, and looking closely at the strict rules governing these words leaves me with a genuinely profound thought to chew on.
Where does the grammar lead us?
Well, think about the ultimate dividing line we established. Would is our most cinematic, nostalgic, and vivid tool for sharing memories.
Right.
But the strict laws of English completely forbid us from using would to describe our states of being. We cannot use our most vivid language to describe who we were, where we lived, what our conditions were, or how we felt. The rules dictate that we are only allowed to use our most cinematic language to describe our repeated actions.
It is exclusively reserved for the things we actively did.
Exactly. Does that mean the most vivid, vibrant parts of our history, the moments that truly play like a movie in our minds, are defined not by the circumstances we found ourselves in or the passive states of our existence, but entirely by the choices we made and the actions we took over and over again.
Wow. The architecture of the language itself forces us to highlight our actions over our circumstances. It prioritizes what we did over what we simply were.
I think it does. The grammar is quietly telling us that our active choices are what actually build the best memories. Something for you to mull over the next time you find yourself reminiscing about the past. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.